Since returning from the mission to rescue the Chancellor, Anakin Skywalker had become increasingly close to Palpatine. Each new meeting brought them closer, and one day, after sharing all of his fears, especially his fear of losing Padme, Anakin heard one last secret. But this time, instead of alerting Mace Windu, Anakin listened to the Chancellor's words and chose to accept them, deciding to hear about the teachings the Sith had to offer. The truth was that Anakin Skywalker had delved deeply into Palpatine's secret teachings. The Chancellor offered Anakin dark training in the use of the Force. He taught him how to manipulate the minds of living creatures, to control their heartbeats, to choke targets from a distance, and to absorb life energy. He also took him to forgotten worlds, where Anakin learned to master the Force through pain and sacrifice. On these secret journeys, Anakin was constantly challenged to abandon compassion, replacing it with control and power. Even Darth Sidious, the master of shadows and manipulator of galactic destiny, was astonished and completely surprised by the power that awakened within Anakin Skywalker. Through dark rituals and forgotten Sith teachings, Palpatine immersed Anakin in the deepest, darkest parts of the Force. What had once been raw potential was now being shaped into pure, controlled destruction. Each training session brought new manifestations of power never before seen among mortals. Palpatine saw before him not just the chosen one, but a titan born of the very will of the Force. The young Skywalker began to master feats that once seemed impossible, alongside the Chancellor. After just a few months of training in the Sith arts, with a simple gesture, he lifted rocks larger than starships and made them fly like leaves in the wind. Not even Palpatine understood how he had achieved such an absurd level of power with the Force. Heavy creatures, with tense muscles and sharp fangs, froze at his presence, paralyzed by an invisible force Anakin had learned to channel. One day, before Palpatine, Anakin raised his hand and the flow of a waterfall reversed, as if it were nothing. It was as if nature itself retreated before the new lord of raw power. A completely new being had awakened, but the moment Palpatine enjoyed most was when Anakin demonstrated the raw power of the Force by compressing beings and objects. Centuries-old trees, with trunks as thick as temple columns, were crushed with the mere curl of his fingers. The air vibrated around him, dense and electrifying, as if the universe were preparing for something grand and terrifying. Palpatine imagined the Jedi Council Masters being crushed in the same way. Anakin was no longer an apprentice. He was a living storm, shaped by darkness and fueled by prophecy. Anakin had always been confident and even somewhat arrogant, but with all that power and the new knowledge and stories of the ancients that he had learned, Skywalker began to realize that he no longer needed to follow anyone's orders. He realized that those who truly hold power are the ones who have the right to command. The former Jedi, now walking in the dark arts of the Force, decided that he didn't need to obey the council that denied him the title of master and kept him on a leash, nor did he need to fulfill the dreams of grandeur and destruction that Palpatine constantly spoke of during their secret training. And so, Anakin made an unexpected decision. Instead of kneeling before the dark side, he chose to challenge the very system that confused him. He called for an extraordinary meeting of the Jedi Council, claiming to have information too sensitive to be ignored. With Palpatine's approval, who appeared willing to cooperate, the invitation was extended to the Chancellor himself. The Jedi Temple Hall was prepared for the meeting, and the Masters began to gather, their eyes filled with suspicion. Mace Windu, Yoda, Ki-Adi-Mundi, Plo Koon, and Obi-Wan were present. Anakin entered with determined steps, but a racing heart. At his side, Palpatine appeared calm, almost paternal. "Jedi Masters," Anakin began, "there are truths you need to hear." The council members narrowed their eyes. Palpatine gave a slight smile, as if he had been waiting for this moment for a long time. And in that instant, Anakin questioned whether he had made the right choice, but he showed them everything he had achieved in the past 6 months under Palpatine's guidance. The Jedi Temple was in absolute silence, but Yoda himself had already sensed what was to come. He was the first to notice that the Force within Anakin was completely unbalanced, yet extremely powerful. Anakin did not say another word. He simply closed his eyes and, with a gesture, the atmosphere around him changed. The air grew heavy, The ground trembled slightly, and all the masters felt a sudden discomfort. Palpatine applauded silently as Anakin extended his hand. Suddenly, all the Jedi Masters were frozen in place, without a single finger touching them. The temple's columns vibrated, and they had the impression that the structure might collapse. Birds and monarchs flying through the skies of Coruscant fell dead when Anakin focused the Force on them, as if their life energy had been drained. Then he made all the lightsabers float at the same time and activated them together before the Master's eyes. The blades of light began to fight as if wielded by knights until they returned to the belts of their respective owners, including Palpatine's red saber. And then, Anakin took a small seed from his robe. With care, he placed the seed on the ground and, with the Force, made roots appear and a stem rise. In seconds, a splendid flower was born, vibrant and alive. The silence was broken only by an impressed murmur from Master Yoda. But soon, with another gesture, Anakin made it wither and die before everyone's eyes. His eyes now glowed with a threatening golden hue. The Masters were visibly astonished. For the first time, they felt inferior to the one they had sworn to train and protect. Especially Obi-Wan. Everyone demanded explanations but got little from Anakin. Each one who tried to intervene was stopped by pure Force power. They were forced to witness that bizarre demonstration. Then Palpatine stepped forward and proudly revealed that he was the Sith Lord behind the entire war. Silence gave way to chaos. Lightsabers were activated once more. Mace Windu threatened to strike right then and there, followed by Ki-Adi-Mundi and Plo Koon. Palpatine also activated his saber and smiled, as if he had been waiting for this moment for years. The tension was unbearable. Only Yoda remained calm. The council was split between attack and caution. But before the first blow was struck, Anakin rose again. With another gesture, everyone there was forced to kneel, including Palpatine. Only Yoda remained unmoved, serene, resisting the pressure of the Force as if it were part of a children's training exercise. Anakin spoke with a firm voice. The purpose of that revelation was not destruction, but rebirth. He would not only accept his destiny as a Sith alongside Palpatine, but would also be the link between the orders, which is why he made the Dark Lord kneel before all the Jedi, so they would know that Anakin now had enough power to subdue even the Sith Lord. Anakin believed he could create a bridge between Jedi and Sith. There would be no more war, only balance. Palpatine lost his smile. "This was not in our plans," he said, perplexed. Mace Windu shouted that it was impossible, that the dark side would corrupt even the purest soul. But Anakin, unshaken, looked into each of their eyes and said, "Then test me, but know that none of you are in control here. And remember, I don't give second chances." With the Force, he made the Masters kneel even further, their knees sinking into the stone floor. Only Yoda, once again, remained impassive in his seat, observing and reflecting. It was at that moment that Anakin remembered. A memory as strong as lightning, a last moment with Padme. Years ago, when the two had just gotten married and were together and happy. A silent evening in the gardens of Naboo, where the breeze blew through the flowers and Padme's fingers gently caressed Anakin's hair. "Promise me you won't hurt anyone, Anakin," she said with tears in her eyes. "No matter how much power you have. Promise you'll protect, not dominate. Promise that the extermination of the desert people won't be repeated." He hugged her in silence, feeling his heart tighten. Padme held Anakin's face and repeated, with a trembling but firm voice, "No matter what they say or what destiny shows, you are still good. You will always be my Jedi. The Force is with you, but love is what must guide you." The words were etched into his soul. They were what, deep down, kept him from being completely lost. And now, before the kneeling Masters, before a confused Palpatine and the silence of the galaxy, Anakin knew he had chosen his own path. Everyone turned their eyes to Anakin who, with clenched fists and eyes still slightly yellow, concluded, "I married Padme in secret and she made a request of me. That day I accepted without thinking twice. But now I see that only half of my promise makes sense. I refuse to be reborn as a Sith Lord. I refuse that name, Darth Vader, that you, Palpatine, chose for me." The Chancellor himself turned pale upon hearing this. It was as if he saw control slipping through his fingers. The plan he had been plotting for years was crumbling before the firm decision of his most powerful protege. The Jedi Council was still trying to process the twist, surprised by Anakin's choice to deny both traditional paths of the Force. Anakin walked to the center of the room and looked at everyone present. "I am no longer just a Jedi. I can no longer consider myself part of this code that has repressed me." He sighed, as if a truth had emerged in his mind. That's when Yoda, with half-closed eyes, interrupted with gentleness and wisdom. "What you seek? I understand, young Skywalker. A gray Jedi you wish to be." There was silence. Even Palpatine seemed to ponder the term. Anakin nodded slowly, surprised by Yoda's accuracy. The title made sense. Someone who walks between the light and the shadow. "A gray Jedi," Anakin repeated, savoring the idea. "That's what I am. From today on, neither the Jedi nor the Sith will dominate the balance of the Force alone." Turning to the Council, he said, "You will have to work together. You and Palpatine. There will be no more war between you. This division has only brought suffering. From now on, we will no longer fight as enemies. That I will no longer allow. Things on Coruscant and in the galaxy will change under my command. As long as you do not disappoint me, you will have nothing to fear. Just follow what I tell you." His tone was firm, almost paternal. There was an authority that transcended hierarchies. Like a mother scolding quarrelsome children, Anakin imposed a reconciliation, even if by threats. Mace Windu and other masters said that the idea was madness, that it was not possible to work alongside a Sith. The tension was palpable, but after Anakin made the masters speak to one another, no one confronted him directly. Even the most reticent Jedi were overtaken by a sense of respect and caution in the face of Anakin's resolve. He then took a deep breath and said, "There's something else. Padme and I are going to have a child." There were discreet murmurs among the Jedi. Anakin continued, "It is for this child that I will bring about this change in the world. I cannot allow him to be born amid an endless war between Jedi and Sith, especially knowing that I can end it." Palpatine, trying to regain his influence, stepped forward. His voice was persuasive, almost hissing, "Anakin, you are the chosen one. Your mission was to destroy the Jedi, unleash chaos, and give birth to a new order under my command. We planned this." But his words now seemed to echo emptily. The power had changed hands. Obi-Wan, still stunned, searched for meaning in all of it. His eyes were fixed on Anakin, trying to understand what had really happened during those months with Palpatine. "You trained with me, fought by my side. Anakin, you were so close to the abyss. But this power and these ideas are not natural." The pain in the Master's voice was evident. But Anakin, with a serene expression, replied, "Precisely because I touched the abyss is why I understand what needs to be done. The power I acquired will not be used in vain. I will make this world truly just, and one day the very word inequality will be forgotten in the face of what I've built. At first, I will need to use fear and control, but the entire galaxy will thank me for it later." He looked firmly at Palpatine. "You used me. Deep down, I always knew, but it will no longer be that way." The Jedi were still in shock, but none dared interrupt. Palpatine, realizing that his manipulation had been undone, tried one last time to approach Anakin, trying to regain his place at his side, trying to manipulate him once again, but Anakin looked at the Chancellor as if he were nothing. Palpatine was stunned and took a step back. Yoda, still calm, walked to the center of the room. His gaze met Anakin's, and there was more than understanding there. There was acceptance. "Difficult this path will be, young Skywalker, but necessary perhaps it is. If wrong you are, the fall itself will provoke." Anakin nodded respectfully. Palpatine rose slowly, his eyes burning with rage. Anakin Skywalker had stood up to leave. The Chancellor's expression twisted into pure fury. "You dare turn your back on me? You dare give me orders?" he growled. Without hesitation, Palpatine drew his lightsaber, activating it with a lethal hiss. But before he could take the first step, Anakin turned around. His golden eyes glowed intensely. The young knight raised his hand, and with a subtle motion, the Force concentrated around Palpatine. The Chancellor was immediately paralyzed. His limbs locked like a puppet caught in its own invisible strings. His feet lifted off the ground, and he began to float in the air. "I told you there would be no second chances. Not even for you, Master," said Anakin, his voice cold and without hesitation. With a simple gesture, he channeled the Force into a single point and used it as never before. Palpatine began to be crushed like the trunks Anakin used to destroy in the training fields. The sound was grotesque. Bones giving way, flesh being compressed, the air ripped from his lungs. There were no screams. Fear had been replaced by surprise and horror. Within seconds, the once invincible Sith Lord's body was reduced to a twisted, motionless figure, tossed to the center of the Hall of Power. Anakin slowly lowered his hand. "The cycle ends here," he murmured. The shadows danced on the walls, but the real fear now came from the man at the center. Not the apprentice anymore, but the ultimate predator. The Empire wasn't born. It was shaped by the hand of one man. Yoda had asked that no master interfere. In the months that followed, the galaxy breathed a moment of quiet peace. Padme gave birth to Luke and Leia under maximum protection. First, everything seemed promising. Anakin resumed his role as a hero, eliminating remaining threats and stabilizing systems in chaos. But the Jedi knew something had changed. Masters like Plo Koon, Ki-Adi-Mundi, and other Jedi tried to intervene, confronting the new and powerful Anakin. He crushed them as he had crushed Palpatine, not out of hatred, but from sheer conviction. No one could match him anymore. Every attack from the Jedi Order was neutralized with brutal precision. The Force within Anakin had transformed, evolved. He manipulated thoughts with ease, using a new kind of mind trick that even made the strongest hesitate. He used this power to reach the most respected position on the Galactic Council in a single day. The Jedi Council was dissolved in a symbolic vote, under the cold gaze of Skywalker, now simply called Supreme Chancellor. But unlike Palpatine, he did not execute the remaining masters. "You will live, as long as you know your place," he declared in a public speech. Obi-Wan was the last to try and speak with Anakin. His words were ignored. "You still believe you can change me with empty phrases?" said Anakin, with a slight smile. "The galaxy is better now." Kenobi gave up. Mace Windu and Yoda decided to retreat, waiting in exile for the right moment. The Order had fallen, but the Jedi, like sparks beneath the ashes, still survived. The clones, now under the direct command of the new Chancellor Skywalker, became enforcers of the new regime. The streets filled with white armor. Over time, curfews were imposed. Holograms with Anakin's serene face appeared in cities. Peace is obedience. Freedom is chaos. The people, tired of wars, gave in. Padme, even beside the man she loved, felt like a shadow of herself. Something was broken. The home they lived in was silent, clean, and secure, but cold. Luke and Leia grew up with all the security and protection possible, but without the laughter that should have accompanied them. The galaxy seemed suspended in artificial silence. Anakin was not a tyrant like Palpatine. There was no public torture or widespread slavery, but there was absolute control. No one dared disobey orders. Children recited mantras in schools. The Force is in balance. Anakin guides us. The world was a soft, disguised version of terror. Even Padme, in private conversations, began to wonder if the man she loved was still there, or if he, too, had been crushed alongside the trunks of the past. Hope felt like a distant echo. Years passed. Luke and Leia were now 5 years old. They were curious and strong. Padme guided them with affection, but fear was always there, lurking. Anakin left every morning and returned only at night. Sometimes he spent weeks on missions to control rebellions, but always with that air of absolute control. Then, on an ordinary afternoon, while brushing Leia's hair, she heard a faint sound coming from the back door. Her eyes widened when a hooded figure appeared. Silently, she stood up quickly. "Obi-Wan," she whispered. He removed his hood, his eyes tired but resolute. "Padme, we need to talk. Now." Obi-Wan knew that Padme was no longer the same, and even though she disguised her feelings, her tired and distant gaze screamed for help. She pretended to follow Anakin's orders, fearing his fury, but the love that once burned between them had faded. Obi-Wan took her and the children to a safe place while Anakin was on another planet handling matters for his new order. In the first days of the escape, Padme did not say a word. She watched them sleep, protected them, but her heart beat in constant alarm. Hope was faint but real. Obi-Wan took her to Dagobah, where the ancient masters Mace Windu and Yoda trained. There, among the swamps and mist and the structures built by the Jedi themselves, she waited with the children, far from the watchful eye of the new Chancellor Skywalker. But the answer did not take long. When Anakin discovered the escape, his fury burned like a supernova. The gray Jedi felt through the Force where Padme was. He followed the trail with relentless precision, using search probes and his own sharp senses. Dagobah, with its thick mist and primitive life, hid secrets, but not for long. One day, the forest fell silent, until the sky was torn by the roar of a black ship. Anakin had arrived personally to bring his family back. However, this time the Jedi felt prepared. 5 years before, when everything began to collapse, Yoda summoned Obi-Wan and Mace Windu to the swampy planet. "Here we must train. The shadow we will face," said the old master with tired but firm eyes. They did not yet know what the days ahead would be like. Yoda subjected them to intense training, similar to what he would later teach Luke, but certainly 10 times more difficult. Carrying increasingly large stones over days while balancing the body with the Force and escaping deadly beasts, climbing slime-covered trees blindfolded using only one hand and one leg while having rocks tied to their backs, meditating in powerful waterfalls where the water flow could break solid rocks in minutes, confronting unknown creatures and learning their secrets, uniting with the planet's force and thus using life to their advantage. The Jedi undertook this new training with great dedication and then realized that time seemed to flow differently on Dagobah, and the power there grew. The Jedi began to fortify themselves like never before. But would it be enough? Obi-Wan learned to hear the whispers of the Force even in the silence of the swamp. It was as if he knew what would happen before it even happened. This was common for Jedi, but Obi-Wan began to predict Master Yoda's own moves, and this had never happened before. Mace, always impulsive, learned to contain his anger and transmute his intensity into clarity. He used Vapad with more precision, and the power he could now wield was getting closer and closer to what he saw Anakin use years before. It was still not enough to face the Chosen One head-on, but it would be enough to buy them a few seconds. Yoda guided them not only with words but with experiences. Once, he took them to a cave where the Force manifested in its purest state. The same cave where years later Luke would face his own image with Vader's helmet. The two masters understood that they would never defeat Anakin with brute force. They would need something greater: wisdom, cunning, patience, and strategy. There were snakes on that planet that merged with the mud, giant frogs that jumped kilometers, trees that reacted to the presence of the Force. Together, they created silent, natural, and deadly traps. False pools that sucked everything to the bottom, branches that entangled like tentacles, dense fog with illusions caused by channeling crystals, mushrooms with pores that exploded. And then time passed and they felt ready. So they made the bait. Padme was used as bait, and it was successful at first. Black as night, blazing like a comet, Anakin landed and without hesitation crossed the swamp. He decided to come personally because the Force guided him. The traps began to act. Trees exploded with hallucinogenic gas. Creatures leapt upon him. Illusions of Padme and his mother confused him. But he advanced. Mace Windu used his Vapad combat form, channeling Anakin's fury against himself, deflecting each blow with fierce precision. When Anakin launched a big projectile or trapped one of the masters with the Force, it was Mace Windu who leveled the game and prevented Anakin's absolute domination. Anakin's powers were still stronger, but Master Mace Windu needed only a few seconds and was soon covered by his companions. Obi-Wan, moving among hidden roots and branches, applied surgical and quick attacks, emerging from the shadows like a ghost from the past. He also tried to use his words to convince Anakin to stop this madness. "There may still be time, Anakin. I did not teach you the use of the Force for this dictatorship. If you stop now and promise to give up this power, I'm sure they will forgive you." But Anakin remained relentless and paid no heed to Obi-Wan's words. Yoda, smaller in stature but immense in the Force, manipulated the environment. Stones, fog, and even the sounds of the swamp danced according to his will. At one point, local creatures, like snakes that coiled like whips and insects that emitted paralyzing noises, were guided by the green-skinned master to confuse Anakin's senses. Every trap, every move was planned to wear down the enemy, not destroy him. And still, Anakin pushed forward, unstoppable, like a storm of power. He was too powerful to be defeated by force alone. He had to be defeated another way. When Anakin approached the center, the three masters led him to the ancient cave. Anakin entered not knowing what would happen there. The masters gave their all during this battle of deception and for a moment achieved their goal. Anakin was inside the mysterious cave. Inside, darkness enveloped him immediately. Inside the cave, he saw Padme fleeing with another man. He saw his children groan, raising sabers against him. He saw himself as a monster, as a terrible Sith, a merciless dictator, as a hated being. He saw how he was slowly killing Padme. He tried to fight the visions, but the more he attacked, the more they multiplied. It was his soul, shattered, reflected in 1,000 fragments. Outside the cave, the masters waited. Time passed, and the swamp returned to its calm. Mace sat in meditation, exhausted. Obi-Wan looked at the trees, thinking of the mistakes that led to that journey. Yoda remained silent, listening to the Force. Then, at last, the cave trembled and everything went quiet. Anakin did not come out, and suddenly the whole cave collapsed. A great sinkhole appeared where before there was only the power of the Force. No one went after him. The masters understood that it was Anakin who caused it. It was the end of an era and the beginning of something new. The shadow had not been destroyed with sabers but with truth. He repented and destroyed himself. In the following days, Padme wept, not for Anakin but for all he could have been. Luke and Leia, though young, understood that something great had happened. They grew up and returned to the simplicity of Naboo, with masters who taught them to feel before fighting, to understand before judging. The galaxy still had problems and was out of balance, but a flame had been rekindled, a spark of light, fueled by courage, sacrifice, and hope. Yoda, even old, smiled watching the twins run. Mace and Obi-Wan, finally at peace, looked to the horizon and planned how to reopen the Jedi Temple. "The Force still shines," said Yoda, and as the sun rose through the swamp's mists, the promise of a new era rose with it.